Errol Spence Jr.'s downfall needs to be studied. As we all know, around 2 years ago now, Errol Spence took his first defeat to Terence Crawford in a fight that was built up for years to see who was the #1 pound for pound fighter in the whole world. But unfortunately, as we saw, Spence was beaten pretty easily in this fight. And as a Spence fan, that was a depressing fight to watch, to be honest with you. But ever since that defeat, we've heard little to nothing from Errol Spence Jr. No signs of a comeback fight, no plans for the future, and he's really gone under the radar. So it leaves us with a big question. What happened to Errol Spence? Well, to discover that, we need to go back in time and find out how Errol Spence came to be Errol Spence. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into his come up. But before we do that, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications if you guys want to see more boxing related content. Alright, now let's get into it. Errol Spence Jr. was born in Long Island, New York, and eventually moved to Texas with his family from a young age. Now it's funny to note that Errol Spence didn't start boxing until he was 15, which for a lot of boxers is considered very late actually. He was actually playing American football before he started the sport of boxing, wanting to play for the Dallas Cowboys until he developed a passion for the sport of boxing. He stepped into the boxing gym and met his trainer, who was the legendary Derrick James, who is still his trainer to date. Derrick James took him under his wing and Errol Spence dominated the amateur scene, having a record of 135 wins and 12 losses. Now, if you've ever been involved in the amateur game, you would know how good this record actually is. He also went on to compete in the 2012 London Olympics, and after his Olympic experience, he went on and turned pro. And it's fair to say he dominated the professional scene just as much. Now, there's a story about Errol Spence Jr. in his early professional career, apparently having sparring sessions with Mayweather, and a lot of rumors have gone around that he gave Mayweather some good work and gave Mayweather a tough time, proving how good the young prodigy actually was. He was tearing up the competition and was eventually leveling up his competition and started dominating the welterweight division, beating the likes of Mikey Garcia, Lamont Peterson, Sean Porter, and Kell Brook. He was such a dominant force and really displayed such tight textbook boxing, also having knockout power. And it had gotten to a point where Spence had secured himself 2 of the belts in the welterweight division, but can you guess who had the other 2? That's right, it was Terence Crawford. And at this point, both fighters had done enough to both be top names on the pound for pound list. So all it would take is a fight between these two to decide the top name, right? Well, no actually. This fight took years of negotiations, and truthfully, people had accepted the fact that this fight was never actually going to happen until everything changed. Spence had literally just come off his biggest win of his whole career, beating Sean Porter and dropping him in the fight. And just less than 2 weeks later, Spence was involved in a huge car crash that should have truthfully ended his life. His Ferrari flipped over multiple times, and if you've seen the video of it, it's pretty bad. He was then put in intensive care for some time, with people not being sure on his situation or his future, because with the crash so intense, let's be honest, it was looking like he'd never be able to box again. However, Spence made a speedy recovery and made a great comeback and went straight into a fight against a world-class top name in Danny Garcia. Now, there were a lot of questions on Spence's career at this point after coming off such a big car crash, but he showed in that fight that he's still at that top level, dominating Garcia, showing that he was healthy again. But from this point on, we started to see some cracks in Spence's game in terms of reflexes and just overall mental clarity. And I'm not sure if many people noticed it at this point, but it was from this point on that he was never going to be the same fighter he once was. Still, he still went on to continue beating top names like Ugas, and finally, after years and years of negotiations, the mega fight between him and Terence Crawford finally got made. And this fight was labeled by experts as a 50-50 fight. However, when the fight actually ended up happening, let me tell you, it sure as hell was not a 50-50 fight. Spence was completely dominated by Terence Crawford in this fight, being dropped multiple times and eventually being stopped, which was one of the toughest fights for me as an Errol Spence fan to watch. And even if you weren't an Errol Spence fan, damn, it was a tough watch. Seeing everybody's hero get beaten up like that was just not cool to watch. However, it left a big question mark on Errol Spence's career now. Where does he go from here? What options does he have? Should there be a rematch? And I think that fight really showed that Spence isn't the same Spence he was before. And I gave my opinion on the fight, and I said that Spence should go into retirement because I don't think he's the same fighter, and there's just no need for him to continue. However, it literally seems that Errol Spence has completely gone under the radar after this fight. We've heard little to nothing from him. Now, there have been some slight discussions about a comeback fight, but we've not really heard any negotiations or seen anything that would give us the impression that Spence is going to return to boxing, which is a shame to see, but I think it's for the best. I truly think that car crash took so much out of Errol Spence and he just wasn't the same. And look, I'm not saying that he would have beat Crawford if he didn't have that car crash. However, I don't think it would have been such a dominant fight if he never had that car crash. Crawford may still be the better fighter, but it's clear that a crash like that took a lot out of Errol Spence, as it would. But now his future's unclear, and at 35 years old, I'm not sure we'll ever see him in the ring again, which is a shame, but like I said, I think it's for the best. But what do you guys think? Is Errol Spence going to come back? Should he come back? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you don't miss an upload. Anyways, that'll be all. I'll catch you in the next one.